madness. So, this... Sorry, one moment. Yes, come in. Do you ever read Sutter Cane? What? Actually, I've never read any of his work. What? Yeah, like, he's a little too mainstream for me. Yep. Really? And come on, like, some of the stuff, it's such a Lovecraft knockoff, like Hobbs End horror, Dunwich horror, obviously. Come on, man. I mean, even in the artwork and the name there, Sutter Cane, Stephen King, like, you know what? Just forget it. It's this way too on the nose for me personally. You have a good day, sir. Well, that was a little odd. Where were we? Okay, all intro jokes aside, today, yes, we are talking about the 1994 John Carpenter film In the Mouth of Madness, starring Sam Neill, that guy from Jurassic Park. So, this one is a bit of a lesser known film, but I think it's grown a following over the years. I sort of stumbled upon it just through like random YouTube recommendations and stuff when I started going on my Lovecraftian vibe, my Lovecraftian kick a couple of years back. The title of the movie caught my attention. In the Mouth of Madness. Well, that's obviously gotta be a reference to At the Mountains of Madness, the other, classic Lovecraft story, right, where there's like weird ancient beings in Antarctica or something like that. So, that title caught my attention, and then I saw it was about this guy going crazy about reality, and there was weird tentacle monsters and stuff in it, so, obviously it caught my attention. Yes, well, if we're talking weird Lovecraftian stuff, what better to do that with than a really weird squid-like beer? This is Kelp Stout from Tofino Brewing. Yeah, it's a beer made with kelp. Would you believe that? That's definitely a strong one. A little bitter, but there's like a nice seaweed taste to it, if you can actually believe that, right? Yeah, this is one of my favorite weird beers to show off, and I was already vibing the Lovecraftian movies and stuff, so hey, what better way to complement it than with a great beer like this? So, I think I've seen lots of YouTube channels in recent years doing re-reviews of this movie, kind of discussing it. And main focus is that, no, this movie isn't perfect, but it's got a real cool style to it. Nice idea. It's a very meta film. Kind of like the idea of a film within a film, or a story within the film, or that the entire film is in it of itself a story within the film, if that makes sense. Obviously I'll be spoiling everything. That's usually how my reviews work. So, we're just gonna keep getting into it. We're just gonna give her. Because the film is called In the Mouth of Madness, but we see at the beginning this book being printed by this new renowned author played by, how do you say his name? Jürgen Prochnow. He's a German actor. He's in Dust Boat and Dune, but I didn't recognize him in this movie because he didn't have his signature beard facial hair. He's got no facial hair and this big white poofy hair. He looks like he's a Time Lord or something, but he's great. As Sutter Cane, who is kind of an amalgamation of both Stephen King and H.P. Lovecraft. Because, like Stephen King, he writes a lot of horror novels. The artwork on the front, it's very similar to the paperback stylization of Stephen King's works. You know, the name sounds very similar. And then the Lovecraftian stuff is that there's this idea that, like, his writing is conveying the will of some great cosmic monstrosities beyond some other dimension or other realm beyond our understanding. And a lot of the titles of the books that Sutter Cane writes are knockoff titles of Lovecraft stories. So Sutter Cane has Hobbs End horror, which is obviously the Dunwich horror. And then there's other similar titles like Whisperer in the Darkness, which is like, there's like Haunter in the Dark, or like Rats in the Cellar, or I don't know all the titles off the top of my head, but it's all very similar references. And then, of course, At the Mountains of Madness, In the Mouth of Madness. You know, quite similar. And then, like Stephen King, a lot of this takes place in northeastern America. Not in Maine, in New England, New Hampshire-ish, you know, Salem-type old-timey towns. And that's also a Lovecraft reference, in that Lovecraft had a lot of stories taking place in this town of Arkham and its neighboring areas like Dunwich and Aylesbury and Innsmouth. And then there's this hotel in the movie called the Pickman Hotel, and that's a reference to Pickman's model. So all the references all over the place. It's not trying to be subtle about it. You know, it's very overt. If you've heard anything about anything Stephen King or Lovecraft, these should be very obvious to you. So we see that throughout the film, this book is being created, a book called In the Mouth of Madness, and that they're going to make a film out of it. And that's the film we see as an audience at the end. But also Sam Neill's character sees it. So, in a way, I think this idea is that, like, the whole film is about a character in a novel, like, becoming self-aware and realizing they are a character in a story, like, trying to escape that thinking that they're a real person. And at the end, they kind of have the soul-crushing realization that they are only a character in the story. They don't have free will. They're only following what the author tells them to do. And that once the credits roll and the film ends, he will essentially be dead, because his existence is confined to the realms of the story and the medium, because he is not real. So that's my general interpretation of the film. And I think with this one, it's like John Carpenter, director, he, of course, had so many classic films in the 70s and the 80s, like Assault on Precinct 13, Dark Star is kind of, you know, a cult classic in the kind of so bad it's good way, Halloween, which is not a straight-up slasher movie, but it's like, you know, was very influential in the genre, almost as much as Black Christmas. And The Thing, which is like the best remake ever, and one of the greatest sci-fi horror movies ever. If it wasn't for Alien, that would probably be my favorite one. And a lot of other classic ones like Christine and was it Starman with Jeff Bridges, and Escape from New York. So a lot of great ones like that. And Prince of Darkness, which I haven't seen, but apparently that's the second in his so-called Apocalypse Trilogy, about movies where the world is about to end. And so that would make In the Mouth of Madness the third in this trilogy, because the apocalypse is about to happen. everyone's about to go mad from reading the writing of Sutter Cane, with which he has penned from his knowledge of the beyond realm, as the old ones have commanded him to. But I know that apparently, I haven't seen these, but a lot of 90s John Carpenter movies are just like very not good. He did like what? Ghosts of Mars and Vampires and Escape from LA, and I haven't seen those ones, but apparently they're all pretty bad or just not good. So In the Mouth of Madness is kind of like the last great John Carpenter film. And some directors, they take a while to get going, and then they build up their style and they figure out what works, and other ones are just kind of like, eventually they kind of flame out a bit. You can only make so many masterpieces for so long. I guess that's what happened with John Carpenter. Seems like he's a pretty cool dude, though. And I like that he writes the music for most of his movies. That's pretty awesome. And that he, tours with a band, and they perform the soundtrack to his films live. That's great. The soundtrack to this movie is also pretty great. Most of it's, atmospheric stuff that, is serviceable and it gets the job done. The music that plays during the sort of cafe scene, the bit where that I parodied in the intro of this video, of course, where we see the weird man who turns out to be Sutter Cane's agent or publicist or something. He walks across the street with an axe, he smashes the window, and he looks at Sam Neill's character, was it John Trent, something like that? I remember him Trent because I think it's a 90s film, and I think Trent Reznor from Nine Inch Nails. And he looks at him like, "Do you read Sutter Cane?" Very odd voice. Just such a weird, off-putting scene. It's very spooky, very creepy. But the score in that scene, it's something that sounds very 90s industrial heavy metal. It's like a bow, 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 bow. Makes me think of Tool or something. It's great. Everyone talks about the main theme to this movie, which, as many have pointed out, it sounds like John Carpenter does Metallica, because apparently he either wanted Metallica to make a score for it, or he wanted to use Enter Sandman, which would have been an interesting choice, because Enter Sandman's all about nightmares, and we're off to Never Never Land, we're off to Hobbs End. But his versions, it's charmingly odd. I wouldn't say it's out of place, but it's definitely it's a memorable song. It's very interesting, and it gets you pumped. It's got a groove to it. Again, a very similar sound to Enter Sandman, and just gets you pumped and ready to go. And you're like, oh yeah, let's watch this movie. Yeah. I think more films need to do stuff like that. You get films where they just open with a big scene, and you're thrown into it. And you get the slow burn movies, which are great. But I think films where they open with specifically a song to and the song is there to not necessarily scare you or spook you or set the mood, but just to get you fired up. Right? It just gets you pumped. Oh yeah, let's go. I think this movie gets you really pumped, and David Fincher's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo with the Karen O, Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross cover of Immigrant Song. Was Atticus Ross on that? I know Karen O was. Or as cheesy as it is, Danger Zone at the beginning of Top Gun, and the Top Gun main theme, right? You start watching that movie and you hear that song, and you just get oh yeah, let's fly some planes. Yeah, boy. And this theme to In the Mouth of Madness, it just gets you pumped, right? Bam, bam, I just started humming Balls to the Holes by Accept. That's a completely different song. So yeah, I dig it. And Sam Neill, he's like an insurance investigator trying to find what's happened to Sutter Cane because he's mysteriously disappeared. Gets sent in by the head of this, like, printing press company, I think it is, Charlton Heston. Small little role. He's great. I guess they listened to Wayne's World 2's advice. Like, I know it's a small part, but can't we get a great actor? And bring in Charlton Heston, right? So, it's not a perfect movie, that's for sure. Like, it's a little slow in some parts, and with some repetition a lot in kind of the middle of the film, where they're like in Hobbs End, like them getting to Hobbs End, which is like he puts together the puzzle pieces of all of Sutter Cane's novels. They form this map showing this coordinate where you need to go in like the New Hampshire, New England area, to like this old spooky town called Hobbs End. And it's like they're literally traveling into like another realm or dimension because everything's black, and the shots of the highway, I feel like, I don't know if David Lynch saw this film, but it looks very Lost Highway, which Lost Highway would have come out after this film. And all these like weird, creepy images, like this boy on a bike and he's trying to get away and he can't because it's like some kind of weird time loop where you just can't escape Hobbs End. So he's like old, like he's been trying to leave Hobbs End for years. Yeah, it's a very spooky place, that's for sure. But the first bit where they're in Hobbs End, it's like a little slow and kind of just like odd. Not necessarily in a spooky way, just kind of like, oh, that's odd. But like once the publicist, I forget her name, but once she gets like captured by Sutter Cane and he like forces her to read his writing and it kind of reveals the eldritch truth to her or something like that, then everything is just like balls to the walls, absolute insanity for like the entire last stretch of the movie. Like Sam Neill, he tries like driving away from the town, and no matter what he can do, he just keeps ending up back on the same road, and like people are like killing themselves because like the author said they had to. And this is kind of your clue, right, that it's all a novel, it's all a story, because characters are basically saying, well, we have to do what we have to do because we're told. And Sam Neill, Trent, he's just like no, this is not reality where we are, and this is different. And just to hammer the point in, when he watches the film later, they like repeat that line like multiple times just to kind of get in your head, like, this is not reality, this is not reality, this is not reality, in case you missed it the first couple times he said that line. The whole thing, it's like not necessarily told directly in flashback, but like we see him put in an insane asylum at the start of the movie. He draws a bunch of creepy crosses and symbols all over the walls and on his face, and David Warner is like investigating what's happening. And it's clearly because Sutter Cane's writing has the ability to drive people mad and make them insane. And this is kind of like spreading all over the world, like everyone's reading his stuff and going crazy. Because I guess if like Cthulhu was too lazy to wake up and bring about the Age of Dark and destroy all of humanity, and they just decided like, hey man, here you go, here's the secret formula for destroying all of humanity, write it into a book and get everyone to read the book and watch the film, and it'll do it all for you. Okay, you go ahead now, cleanse the earth for us, and we'll see in a couple million years or something like that. I guess that was the plan. Except not really, because this is all a story that Sutter Cane has written. Layers of meta-ness. And would this have been like around the same time as Wes Craven's New Nightmare? Like Nightmare on Elm Street 6, technically. That would have been a real crazy meta year, that's for sure. Because, like, that movie is all that every other Nightmare on Elm Street movie, was a movie, and now we're following the characters, the actors in the real world, and that Wes Craven wrote the Nightmare on Elm Street movies as a way to contain some evil spirit in the form of Freddy, and that he needs to write another Nightmare on Elm Street movie that Heather Langenkamp needs to star in. So, layers and layers of meta-ness, like an onion. Always like that brain-bending stuff, what is real, what is reality, and In the Mouth of Madness does it very well. There's a scene where Sutter Cane, peels back his face, like he's essentially ripping a hole in reality and peeling back the pages. And it's not the, greatest effect in the movie. It was 94. 94 was still pretty early CG. Wasn't the greatest. Oh well. And then there's this long hallway that looks totally like the Drive Court hallway from Event Horizon. Again, Sam Neill was totally unaware he was in a trilogy of Lovecraftian horrors and end-of-the-world stuff. And there's all these monsters chasing him, and you never get a good look at them, just little flashes here and there, and they're out of focus, and I really like that. If you really want to see them, you can pause the movie, but again, the idea is that it's indescribable cosmic monstrosities that you could never fully see or comprehend, and what's the best way to do that is show a couple close-ups for a few frames, one or two wide shots, keep it hidden in the dark and out of focus, and then the brain will build it itself. That's just how the Lovecraftian stuff works. So they did that very well in this film, that's for sure. It's funny because when I saw this one, I thought, this might be the closest to a proper Lovecraft movie we're ever going to get. And then Color Out of Space and Underwater definitely changed my mind on those. There's another Lovecraft adaptation I haven't seen yet, but seeing as I'm on a horror movie kick, it might be appropriate, and it's called Dagon, which is the title is inspired by the Lovecraft short story Dagon, but apparently it also has lots of similarities to Shadow over Innsmouth. And from the sounds of it, this movie came out before Resident Evil 4, but the fact that it's people getting stuck in a Spanish village with lots of weird hostile locals and old townsfolk, that is straight out of Resident Evil 4. And by Stuart Gordon, who did Reanimator and From Beyond. Also Lovecraft adaptations, so that's pretty cool. I guess I'll have to watch that one next. Perhaps we'll see. If I get time between watching all the other movies I want to watch and filming and editing the videos, right? There's another great meta moment where at the end of the film, Sam Neill, he's let out of his prison cell and everyone's gone crazy and the apocalypse has happened, it's the end of the world, and there's only 2 or 3 shots of the empty city streets that he's walking through, but even those little ones are pretty effective at creating the moment. It really gives me 28 Days Later vibes. How they cleared out all the streets in London for Cillian Murphy to walk around while listening to the great Godspeed You Black Emperor song. And so he goes to a movie theater and he sees a poster for the movie In the Mouth of Madness, which was apparently the actual poster they had for the film. And all the producer and writer credits are the real credits for the film In the Mouth of Madness. The only difference is that the actors are named after the characters, so it doesn't say starring Sam Neill. It says starring John Trent, whatever his name is. And so he sits down and watches the film and sees his own story unfold. And that's where he realizes, this has all been a story, and it's all about to end. That's why, as he's laughing at the realization, he starts crying, because his existence is about to end once the credits roll. Or at least that was my takeaway from the film, perhaps. Also, I love that bit where he's sleeping on the bus, and then he wakes up when Sutter Cane tells him, "Did you ever know my favorite color is blue?" And it's a shot of like him screaming the hell out of his mind while everyone else is like, "What's going on with this guy?" That is such a meme moment. Can the internet please turn that one into a meme? Like, that's my everyday life. Everyone's going about their normal stuff, and I'm just sitting there like, it's great. But yeah, that's kind of the main thing I have to say about this one. Definitely think it was an influential film, and that it was criminally overlooked at the time, that it kind of sort of came and went, but I'm glad this one has a following. Like, I don't know if it was coincidental, but it just seemed that, like, as soon as I heard about this movie and watched it and liked it, that a lot of other channels were posting videos on it, so that's pretty cool. John Carpenter, he's a really good director. It's nice to see, like, his last great film. And always love me the Lovecraft Cosmic One's influence in a story. If you can ever do that, that's great, especially when it's well done. It's got some very memorable moments, some spooky stuff going on. The creature effects aren't always there, but when they do happen, they are very great. And it's just overall, it's a fun, creepy little film, Though I do have one thing to say, and that is, so at the time of filming this, Doctor Strange 2 has not come out yet, but they did confirm that it was being directed by Sam Raimi, who is awesome, and such a nerd. He's great. It is called Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Now, if that isn't, like, one of the best titles for a movie that I've ever heard, like, man, that's such a cool, inventive title. And, like, okay, obviously, the Lovecraft reference in the Multiverse of Madness, at the Mountains of Madness, yeah, but, I mean, it's gotta be a reference to this movie as well, in the Mouth of Madness, in the Multiverse of Madness. So, I really hope that, like, there is some connection between these two films besides just title alone. Like, it better end with Doctor Strange watching a movie about, like, the Marvel events that just happened in that film or something. Or, like, I better hear something about, like, Hobbs End. Or just anything. If you're gonna call it in the Multiverse of Madness, you gotta go all the way and give me an overt reference to In the Mouth of Madness. That's just how it works. So, Sam Raimi, I really hope you deliver on that one. Very interested to see what you do. I really liked Doctor Strange as a character. His movie was decent. I more enjoyed for the spectacle and the visuals than the story itself. It was kind of a little too average Marvel movie for me in that case. But, the fact that he's essentially Dr. House, but a wizard, that's pretty cool. And then there's all the Inception buildings moving around, and Stan Lee's reading Doors of Perception, all about acid trips and stuff, and it's like, okay, I know where you got the idea for this character, that's for sure. So, but yeah, In the Mouth of Madness, great film, the third of John Carpenter's Apocalypse Trilogy, and the second of the unofficial Sam Neill Lovecraftian Trilogy, which includes Event Horizon, which I already covered, In the Mouth of Madness, and another little obscure film from the 80s by a Polish director of Andrzej Sulkowski, Slukowski, I believe is how you say his name. It's one that I actually covered in one of my very first videos, so perhaps I'll talk a little more about that one now that I feel I'm a little more confident as a reviewer and an ASMR artist in the next video. So catch me next time when we talk about possession, and y'all have a good night.